Hi there, and welcome to our Tuesday Live. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. Today is our second last day of building your eating plan, and today we're talking about our food choices. Last week we spoke about the carbohydrates that we can incorporate, and this time we're going to be looking at the fats and proteins that we can choose for our eating plans. So let's start with proteins. Proteins are a vital part of our diet. We need proteins to make muscle. So that's the predominant function of proteins. Remember though, just as an aside, a lot of people think they can eat lots of protein and they'll have muscle. We have to also exercise to make this protein or make these muscles. So the exercise together with the protein will give us our muscles. Now, when we look at protein, the one thing that I want you to remember is that fat is often attached to proteins, okay? And this is not ideal fat. So this is not the best fat for our bodies. And that is why we always suggest that any fat that is visible on meat is cut off. There is still fat marbled into the meat, which you cannot see, but if you're taking off the majority of what you can see, then you're definitely in a better place. And just from a nice perspective of knowing, if you're looking at the animal foods or the animal proteins, the cuts that have the most marbling come from the areas at the top of the cow because those muscles are not used a lot. So when the animal walks and is using muscles, that part of the meat has less marbling. There's more marbling when a body part is not used. Okay, so that's just a nice to know so that you know which parts of the meat have more fat marbled into them and which have less fat marbled into them. And when we say that fat attached to animal proteins is not healthy, there is one major exception, and that is your fatty fish. Okay, so fish is always a good choice, whether a white fish that has very little fat or a fatty fish that has a lot of fats. Remember, it's the omega-3 fats that we're getting through the fish, and this is vital for our brains, for lubrication of our joints, for our heart. And getting it from your foods is best case. So rather than taking supplements, we do want to try and eat fatty fish at least 3 times a week. You might think this can become quite expensive, and if you're choosing salmon all the time and fresh tuna, then absolutely it can be. But things like herring and snook and sardines and pilchards and mackerel are also very good sources of these omega-3 fats. So just in terms of what proteins are good to choose, when you choose proteins that have very little fat, then those are the best ones and the ones that you can eat on a daily basis. So this is things like your fish, your chicken, your ostrich is also very low in fat, and also your legumes. So those are your beans, your lentils, your chickpeas. These are lovely proteins to add in on most days. Then we get the medium fat proteins, and these have a little bit of fat attached to them, not too much, so we can still eat these relatively regularly in the day. We generally say about 3 a week, 3 times a week. So that is where your egg would fall into, your other red meat, your soft cheeses. Remember with cheese that the softer the cheese, the less fat is in it, and then things like biltong. Okay, so these we can still eat, but we're not going to eat absolutely every day. And then your high fat proteins are the ones that we want to eat least because they bring in a lot of fat. And this is things like your ribs, your hard cheeses, your sausages, your salami. Okay, now it doesn't mean that you cannot eat these foods. My guideline generally is if you are going to eat these high fat proteins, you don't add any other fat to the diet or to that meal. So for instance, normally we'd have our carbohydrates, we'd have some protein, we'd have our vegetables, and then we'd add a little bit of plant fat to the to the meal. If you're having something like ribs, or you're using cheese or sausages, then you just wouldn't add that fat to that meal. Okay, and also we don't want to choose these high fat proteins most of the time because they're not the best fat for us. So even though fat is very good for us, these are not the best fats, and so these we do try and eat less rather than more. Now, our fats and oils are vital for our bodies as well. Our bodies need, they need insulation. It's getting to winter, and if you're too cold, then you just don't have enough insulation. Our organs need protection. Our cells are made up of fats. The hormones need fats for production. There's a lot of reasons why we need fats. Our fat-soluble vitamins need to get transported with fat. So we need fats in our diet. A low-fat diet is definitely not the best for us. And fats are so vital that what we've actually seen is a little bit more fat in the diet in terms of a kind of a Mediterranean style actually works better than a too low fat diet. Okay, but there's a major thing that you need to remember with fats is fats that come from animals are not as healthy as fats that come from plants. So we will try and eat plant fats most of the time, and the fats that come from animals we'll try and keep at a minimum. Okay, so things like nuts and seeds and avocado and olives and hummus and pesto, we want to add to the meals, and we want to add on a regular basis because it adds wonderful nutrition, it also adds amazing flavor, and it gives us more satiety. In terms of oils is a bit of a, what is an oil? So let's think about it. Oils are really refined. We're always saying we mustn't eat refined carbohydrates. Why is it okay to eat refined oils then? If you think about olive oil, very healthy. No reason that I'm not saying it's not healthy, but you've taken the olive, you've squeezed out the fat, and then you've thrown the goodness away. Now the olive brings about even more goodness. So eating the food is much better than eating the refined product. And that's all I want you to remember with oils. It's not wrong to use oil, but they are refined, okay? And then also very, very important is if the oils are heated, they are no longer as healthy as in their raw state. They denature on heating, and then they cannot act in the same way in your body. So try and eat raw wherever possible. So for instance, nuts. Raw nuts are better than roasted nuts. And so oils are great to use, but use them in cooking in very small quantities and rather heat it very lightly. If you heat for long periods of time and very high heats, that's when most of the denaturing will happen. Margarine and butter, still a major debate going on with those. To me, neither brings much goodness to the plate. There isn't much goodness in margarine, there isn't much goodness in butter. They add flavor, absolutely, so in small amounts use them, but limit them. The other fats are far, far better. And which one is better, margarine or butter? Choose the one that you prefer. There is no huge difference. The key for both of them is use them in small quantities if you are going to use them. And that was the fats. Then we get some additional foods and drinks, and these tend to be free if you use them in moderation. Okay, so like your tea and coffee, about 4 cups a day is a good quantity. We try not to go over that. So people often think, oh, but why not more tea? Because tea contains tannins, and tannins interfere with the absorption of your vitamins and minerals. So too much of it is also going to be a negative. In terms of sugar, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of sugar in our day. And I generally say up to 4 teaspoons of sugar is fine to add into the diet. But remember that things like jam, honey, syrup are all sugars, okay? And then remember too, if something says it's sugar-free, it may be sucrose-free, but it may often have a substitute sugar. So any of your other sugars, like your sweeteners or your coconut sugar, they're all still sugars, okay? So we try and limit everything to about 4 teaspoons. Soda water, mineral water can really just help for you to drink more water if you don't like the taste of tap water. Our diet cool drinks, now there's no real goodness coming through from them, so we do want to keep them limited, but from time to time, nothing wrong to have a little bit of that. And then any of your Bovril and Marmite and fish paste and your stocks, herbs, spices, curry powders, vinegars, your soy sauce, Worcester sauce, tomato sauce, soup powders, pepper, chili, piccalilli, mustard, chutney, horseradish, and so on. They're fine to use. You need to make sure that your cooking is delicious, that you're still enjoying your food. So flavor up your food. Please don't go bland. And even though, like say, a little bit of tomato sauce has a bit of sugar in it, what are you using? You're not using a huge amount. Okay, so if you want like a tomato sauce or sweet chili sauce on your plate because you like dipping a little bit, 1 tablespoon is moderation. We do generally try and eat salt sparingly. Remember, this is a very individualized guideline depending on where you are at, but generally we want not to use too much salt, and that's purely because so many of our processed foods have a lot of salt added, and if you're eating a lot of processed food, you are getting a lot of additional salt that you may not be aware of. The non-stick cooking spray is a fantastic way to use less oil in the cooking. And then things like your cocoa powder, your cinnamon, your vanilla extract, they are amazing to use to add flavor. So more your sweeter things. So if you're doing like an oats porridge in the morning, some vanilla extract in there to give it a nice vanilla flavor, or some cinnamon. These are amazing, amazing sweeten up foods, I think. And then your diet jelly, your no milk skinny or chocolate, your light instant soups, very little energy coming in there. So these can be classified as free if you're doing in moderation. If you do too many a day, then it does start adding up. But there sometimes are nice foods that we can add just for extra because we need something. We are human. And that's basically the foods that we're going to be using to make up our eating plan. Next week, we're going to be putting it all together. So next week is the exciting week. And then we can start going according to our plan. So think about your foods for the next week. What proteins and fats do you enjoy? What do you still want to eat? And let's get together next week to put it all together. I look forward to it. Goodbye.